So let's talk about Things Fall Apart. A novel that's just not a book but almost a cultural cornerstone, especially for the Igbo people. Chinua Achebe's work speaks to so many themes: colonialism, tradition, masculinity, change, and resistance. Okonkwo, the protagonist, is a character that embodies a lot of that conflict. His struggles are the struggles of a people caught between their past and the wave of a colonial change. Now, here's the controversy. For the upcoming TV adaptation, Idris Elba has been cast as Okonkwo. Yes, Idris. British, Sierra Leonean, Ghanaian, Hollywood superstar. Now I know what some of you are already thinking. How can Idris Elba, who isn't Igbo, play a character so deeply rooted in Igbo culture? Let's break this down because it's a very layered conversation. Can international financing and recognition compromise cultural nuance? First, we have to look at the broader context of international financing. Let's be honest, the film industry is incredibly expensive. Productions like this, especially adaptations of well-known novels, need global financing to be brought to life. A name like Idris Elba opens doors for those international investors who might not be familiar with Achebe's work but know Idris from his roles in Luther, The Wire, and Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom. But here's where it gets tricky. When you bring in an international attention, does it start to compromise the story's cultural specificity? A work like Things Fall Apart isn't just any African story. It's an Igbo story, and the nuances of that culture are what make the book so powerful. So, while Idris Elba might bring global heights to the project, does it risk diluting the cultural richness that makes Things Fall Apart so unique? It's a difficult line to walk. On one hand, we want these African stories to be told on a massive scale, but on the other hand, we want them to be told well. With all the cultural depth intact, could casting Idris Elba signal a shift towards a more global, watered-down narrative? Possibly, but does global financing sometimes require these sorts of compromises? Also, yes. The balance between the two is something every filmmaker in the global south, especially in Nollywood, is grappling with right now. Does race or ethnicity matter in casting? Now, let's move to the next big question. One that has people divided. Does race or ethnicity matter when casting an actor for a role? Some people are staunchly against Idris Elba playing Okonkwo because he isn't Igbo. And I get it. Representation matters. For many Nigerians, Okonkwo is not just a character. It's a symbol of Igbo culture, tradition, and resistance. There's a strong argument that an Igbo actor would have a better understanding of those cultural intricacies. They have grown with the stories, the language, the behaviors, the things that can't always be taught in a script or rehearsed in front of a camera. They bring something to the role that transcends acting and taps into lived experience. But then, there is the counter-argument. Idris Elba is undeniably a world-class actor. He's transformed into characters from all walks of life and is already proving that he can carry the emotional depth needed for a role like Okonkwo. Is it fair to limit an actor's potential just because they don't belong to the exact same ethnic group as the character? Isn't acting, at its core, about the ability to step into someone else's shoe and tell their story? Think about all that times actors have stepped outside their own race or culture to play iconic roles. In some cases, it's worked out well, like when Elba portrayed Nelson Mandela in Long Walk to Freedom. Nobody argued that it wasn't Souza because the story and performance were powerful. So, does it make sense to impose strict ethnic boundaries in acting? For some, the answer is yes. Especially when the story being told is so rooted in a specific culture. They believe that local stories should be told by local actors who carry the weight of that culture with them. For others, it's about talent. If Idris has the ability to do justice to the character, that should be enough. Do global platforms prioritize local talent and perspective? Which brings me to my last point. Do global platforms actually prioritize local talent and perspective? International productions often focus on what is marketable. At the end of the day, it's all about making money. They need big names to sell these projects to the world. And who is bigger right now than Idris Elba? But at the same time, when we prioritize these global stars, are we sidelining local talents? Are we overlooking incredibly gifted Igbo actors who could step into this role and give it all the cultural depth it deserves. And beyond casting, do global platforms really care about the local perspective, or are they more interested in packaging African stories in a way that appeals to a Western audience? We've seen it before, where stories get watered down for the global stage, losing some of their cultural specificity along the way. There's this danger that in trying to appeal to everyone, the story ends up belonging to no one. I think this is where we need to push back. Yes, we want our stories to be told, but they need to be told in a way that prioritizes authenticity over global appeal. It's a tough balance, but it is crucial if we don't want to lose the art of what makes stories like Things Fall Apart resonate so deeply. What is the right move? So, where do I land on this? Honestly, I'm conflicted. Idris Elba is an incredible actor, and I don't doubt that he will give the role of Okonkwo the justice it deserves. But at the same time, I understand the frustrations of those who feel like this is another example of African stories being told through a global lens that might miss the cultural intricacies. It is important to remember that this is just not one of those casting decisions. It's part of a bigger conversation about how African stories are told on the global stage, and whether we're willing to make compromises for the sake of visibility. At the end of the day, it's up to filmmakers, actors, and audiences to keep pushing for a balance between authenticity and recognition. So what do you think? Should Idris Elba be playing Okonkwo, or should the role have gone to someone from the Igbo community? Does global recognition justify the casting, or is this just another example of cultural nuance being sacrificed for mainstream appeal? Let me know your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think. See you next time.